hush of slate-colored dawn lay over River Run. That fragile hour, when river mist still clung to the battlements and the blackbirds had not yet dared their morning call. Robb Stark stood alone on the Barbican walk above the tumblestone. Frost limning the wolf's head wrought upon his cloak clasp. To his left, the water whispered against the drawbridge chains, steady as breath. To his right, the banners of the trout and dire wolf hung motionless, leaden in the stillness that precedes decision. He felt the hour's chilled silence press into his ribs like a mailed fist, and wondered, not for the first time, whether winter was truly coming or whether it had already arrived, silent and unseen, in the hearts of men. Behind him, the door creaked as Catelyn Stark emerged, lamplight fleeing at her heels. Her face was pale with travel and worry. She had ridden half the realm in 10 days, and the strain of it lingered about her eyes. The gust that followed her found no purchase in her red hair, bound tight within a simple net of gray silk. When she reached her son's side, she touched the back of his crimson surcoat, a gesture as subtle as prayer. "Your Grace," she began, in the hushed voice that mothers reserve for truths they wish were otherwise, "Renly Baratheon waits on our answer. The king's camp swells by the day. Florent, Tarly, Rowan, lords high and numerous. They feast on promise and ready swords." Robb's breath misted before him. "How many?" he asked, though she had told him already. "Near 60,000, with Stormland levies still arriving. And the Tyrell host yet to muster in full." She laid the letter across his palm. The wax seal bore the crowned stag in green. "He offers marriage to Sansa or Arya, should the tides of war deliver them safe to us, land south of the Trident, shared dominion upon victory, and recognition of your northern kingship. In return he asks our swords, our river crossing, and your presence, to give the realm a king it can follow." Robb pressed the parchment between thumb and forefinger, feeling the ridges where hot wax met cool vellum. A gull keened overhead, a lonely sound too far from sea, and the young king remembered Maester Luwin's voice in the Godswood at Winterfell, explaining the balance of things. Every promise is a debt, every crown a yoke. He thought it strange how wisdom returned in echoes when he most wished for guidance. "I have spoken with my lords." His gaze drifted toward the distant north where gray sky met gray land in a seamless morrow. "Karstark would see us march, for blood calls to blood, and he will not rest until Jaime Lannister kneels. Great Jon roars for battle. He would happily march through the neck and burn King's Landing himself if it meant more meat for his dogs." Roose Bolton counsels, cautioned Darcio. "He seldom speaks plainly." Robb traced the seal's antlered crown. "None trust Renly, yet all covet his numbers." "And you?" Catelyn asked. He sighed. "I trust what I have seen." Renly rode from Storm's End with armor gilt and a smile upon his lips while the realm bled. "He is generous, yet I know not his cost. But—" Robb glanced down at the river's black sheen, as though answers might float there among the drifting leaves. "5 kings carve the realm whether we stand apart or stand among. And every raven that arrives bears darker tidings from the riverlands. Lord Tully's bannermen tire, the small folk burn. If we can end this sooner—" Thunder of hooves interrupted them. A stable boy galloped across the outer ward with urgent shouts for the Stark guards. Moments later, Sir Edmure ascended the steps, 2 at a stride. Auburn hair in disarray, face flushed. "The Lannister outriders probe east of Maidenpool," he reported. "Sir Stafford's host moves to relieve Harrenhal. Lord Tywin himself is said to march from the Golden Tooth. Time is a blade at our throat." Robb's hand tightened on the letter, parchment crinkling. He looked to his mother, to his uncle, to the gray dawn that offered neither comfort nor counsel, and thought of Eddard Stark in a dark cell beneath Maegor's holdfast. A choice was no choice at all, when both roads led only deeper into winter's night. That evening, the War Council crowded the great hall, its timber beams groaning softly as banners shifted in the river wind. Braziers spat resin incense, mingling with the sour reek of oilcloth and damp wool. Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, leaned upon the long table's edge, map spread before him, candle stubs illuminating ridges of mountain ink. Lords and captains argued across the parchment rivers in voices alternately hushed and thunderous. Galbart Glover pointing south along the King's Road. Lord Karstark tracing vengeance west toward the Westerlands. Lady Mage Mormont pounding a bear-paw fist by the Golden Tooth. Lady Mormont's daughters echoed her ferocity in sharp glances from beneath shaggy cloaks. Robb's direwolf prowled behind his chair, slow and silent, yellow eyes reflecting firelight. Grey Wind's presence alone muted lesser squabbles, though not even the great wolf could subdue Lord Rickard Karstark's simmering fury. Across the table, Roose Bolton's pale gaze slid like ice over moving pieces of resin, carved as stags, lions, and deerwolves. When voices rose, he lifted a finger, and silence fell as if ropes had drawn tight about throats. Numbers decide battles, yet alliances decide wars. He murmured, voice soft as falling ash. A stag at our flank may be the difference between victory and annihilation. Great John Umber slapped his own chest. A stag at our flank, aye, and a lion at our throat whilst we drink Maid Marguerite's arbor red. I'll not put my sword on a table set by Southron green boys. Starks bend the knee to none. I do not propose bending, Bolton replied, eyes never blinking. Merely that we choose our enemies shrewdly. Should Renly fall to Stannis, and word says Dragonstone sails south, what then? We would stand alone against Baratheon zeal and Lannister gold alike. Nim. A murmured prayer to the Seven from Sir Stevron Frey drew dark looks from Northmen who favored the old gods. Catelyn raised her hands for silence. Renly's offer is plain. Recognition of northern sovereignty, shared victory. But time dwindles. She nodded to her son. King Robb will decide. Robb rose. The murmurs ceased. Candlelight danced upon his mail, forging gold from steel. I am Hoster Tully's guest, he began, voice steady. But I am my father's son, and the North remembers its oaths. Our blades were drawn to free my sisters, and to avenge my father's blood. Each day we delay, more small folk die beneath lion claws. I will not have our cause drown in caution. He looked toward Karstark. The Kingslayer's head will still be ours. But we cannot wage war on two fronts when one front stands ready to join us. He unrolled Renly's letter, letting its words spill into the smoky air. I will ride south with a contingent of 5,000s, river horse, northern pike, wolf and trout together. The rest shall defend the Twins, River Run, and Moat Cailin. I will meet King Renly at Bitterbridge to vow alliance before gods and men. When our banners unite, we will march on the Lannisters from west and south. The realm will know that lions may roar, but wolves hunt in packs, and stags strike from shadowed wood. Down Torstan. Silence lingered like held breath. Then Lord Karstark inclined his head in stiff assent. Galbart Glover drew his dagger and drove it point first into the map at Bitterbridge. One by one the captains echoed the gesture, blades ringing upon oak. Even the great John laughed, great booming thunder that filled the hall. If we must drink with green boys, we'll drink them dry, he roared. Bolton alone smiled thinly, as if he'd tasted bitter draught. May our king's faith be repaid in gold, and not in iron. Robb's heart beat a drumroll beneath his breastplate. He thought of Bran and Rickon beneath Winterfell's boughs, of Sansa caged in the Red Keep, of Arya lost to the winds. He thought of Ned Stark's head bowed upon the Sept's cold stone. And with the memory came steel. Send ravens, he commanded. We march at first light. Their departure dawned beneath banners of rose-tinged mist, the sun rising pale as milk behind low clouds. 5,000 strong spilled from River Run's gates in columns that stretched like steel-tipped rivers southward. Trident archers in river green, Karstark spearmen beneath sun-white banners, splashed with crimson sunbursts, umber axemen whose laughter carried above the clang of hooves, and at the column's heart the riders of Winterfell clad in gray and silver, deer-wolf sigils snapping in the breeze. Catelyn rode beside her son, slender in mail trimmed with tully blue, hair bound in a green scarf. Grey Wind looked ahead, scouting the winding lanes, occasionally pausing to survey hedgerows with ears perked. Villagers lined the muddy road, wool-clad children blinking shyly at the vast Northmen who towered above like stories made flesh. A white-bearded cobbler knelt, head bowed, as Robb's destrier passed. A tanner's wife thrust half a loaf toward a passing Karstark, who accepted it with a wink. In those faces Robb saw hunger and hope mingled, and the weight of such faith settled upon him like fresh-forged mail. One misstep could shatter every wide-eyed gaze. As the host wound south along the King's Road, the riverlands bled around them. Burned mills crusted in ash, orchards hacked down for firewood, gutted cottages where blackened beams jutted like broken ribs. Crows gorged in fields once green. Each ruin whispered Jaime Lannister's insolence, and each whispered hurry. They crossed the Blackwater Rush 10 days later, ferried in shifts upon splintering river barges. Night cloaked them thick as wool, torches bobbing along the banks, and the wind carried the faint tang of sea salt as they neared Bitterbridge. Scouts returned with word of Renly's approach. Standards of the crowned stag quartered with the golden rose of Highgarden, a bloom and a crown dancing in silk beneath the moon. On the final eve before union, Robb took counsel in a ruined sept perched atop a hillock overlooking the fords. Its pillar windows gaped like hollow eyes, but within lay quiet refuge from the chill. There he found himself seated opposite Roose Bolton, the only other soul awake. A solitary candle guttered between them. Its tongue of flame cast long shadows across Bolton's face, revealing nothing. The men's spirits are high. Robb broke the silence, voicing what lay simple and undeniable. Songs by every campfire. Some claim they glimpse the Seven in Renly's gold armor. Others wager whether his queen is more beautiful than the maiden herself. Hope breeds courage. Bolton dipped 2 fingers into the candle's wax, idly coating them. Hope breeds folly too. I pray your cause finds not the latter. He inspected his glistening nails. Renly's allies are Tyrells, Reach Lords, bright petals after rain. Yet petals wilt beneath frost. Robb stiffened. You speak in riddles. I speak in truths. The candle seized a draught, sputtered, recovered. The Reach loves life's comforts. War is cold steel and empty stomachs. If victory drags long, their fervor may freeze. And in such seasons men recall old debts, Tyrell grievances against northern boars that trampled their roses in Robert's rebellion. You counsel retreat? Bolton shook his head. I counsel vigilance. Harmony is delicate, your grace. If the tune changes, be ready to dance alone. None. Robb frowned, but before he could reply, footsteps scratched at the threshold. Galbart Glover entered, helm and crook of elbow. Scouts return. Renly encamps 1 league east. He would meet at sunrise to pledge before gods and men. Robb stood, lifting his cloak from a pew's cracked back. Then we shall give him dawn. As they stepped into moonlit ruin, Bolton lingered a heartbeat, lips curling faintly as though savoring an unsung promise. Then he too melted into night, silent as snowfall. Morning unfurled in hues of bronze across Bitterbridge's rolling field. 2 hosts faced one another upon opposite slopes, a rainbow of standards lifting in the breeze. Here the direwolf gray, there the stag crowned, the rose golden. Trumpets called, echoing like songbirds through autumn woods. Between the armies a wide swath lay clear, Duvladen grass, sparkling like a scattering of gems beneath the newly risen sun. Robb rode forward alone beneath a white banner of truce, gray wind pacing at his destrier's flank. Behind him, Lords Husk cambered their helms but held position, trusting the old laws of parley. Opposite, Renly Baratheon emerged resplendent in green-hamelled armor, antlers of gilded steel crowning his helm, the Tyrell rose sewn in gold along his gorget. At his side strode Sir Loras Tyrell, rainbow guard cloak fanning behind him like a scrap of sunrise. Brienne of Tarth followed 2 paces back, sword still belted though her gaze remained fixed on the young king she served. When Renly removed his helm, dark hair tousled. He bore a smile that could break siege towers. King in the north, he greeted, voice rich as spiced wine. You have traveled far, yet the realm shall remember this dawn. Robb dismounted, handed reins to a squire, and met Renly at the field's center, where 2 oaken stakes had been driven into earth, each bound with cloth of red and white. A septon stood between, holy oils gleaming in crystal phials. I come to bind us, Robb said, extending a gloved hand. Wolves hunt best with kin at their side. Renly clasped his forearm. and stags run swift when wolves clear the snows. He turned to the Septon. Let the seven witness that two kings stand as brothers. The Septon lifted the bread and salt of sacred guest rite, placing it upon a white cloth spread upon a small wooden stool. Robb broke the bread first, sprinkling salt, then offered half to Renly. Together they ate, solemn, as sunlight warmed the back of Robb's neck. When the Septon anointed their brows with oil, murmuring the seven's aspects, a hush fell even among the gathering lords, who worshipped only the old gods. In that hush, 1,000 blades were sheathed, if only for a moment. Renly drew a dagger, jewel-hilted. Robb unsheathed the small skinning knife Jon Snow had gifted him long ago at Winterfell. They traded blades, each offering steel to the other in symbolic trust. The wind shifted. Gray direwolf and crowned stag drooped, then billowed anew, as though the banners themselves exhaled relief. When vows concluded, cheers rose like storm surge. Brienne knelt before Renly to receive his nod, then turned to Robb and solemnly inclined her head. Loras Tyrell bowed as well, though his eyes lingered upon Renly, love-etched bright. In that tableau of banners and kneeling knights, promise seemed almost tangible, a fabric woven of color and breath. Later that day the camps merged as streams converge, tents springing row on row along the riverbank. Northern cooks traded pickled cod for reach apples and sacks of newt brown ale. Doi doti yitori. Queensmen dined beside men sworn to the weirwood. Laughter crackled under the crisp sky. Even the Great Jon found himself arguing jestingly with Randall Tarley over the merits of hare stew versus suckling pig. On the hillside, Renly's singers strummed ballads, while Karstark retainers attempted gruff harmonies of the Bear and the Maiden Fair, each failing gloriously, yet no swords were drawn. Robb walked the lines at dusk, observing this fragile camaraderie. He passed a tent where Arya's name leapt from the conversation of two Tyrell scouts. One claimed she might be hidden with Yoren of the Night's Watch, riding toward the wall. Hope stirred his chest like wings, but he forced the thought away, for hope could drown a man should it falter. He would rescue his sisters with deeds, not with whispers. Near a small cook of fire, he found Brienne seated upon a stump. Visor removed, blue eyes fixed upon a whetstone traveling the length of Oathkeeper. Sparks danced. Robb paused. "Sarah Brienne," he said. She rose at once. She was taller than he by half a head. "Your Grace," she replied, voice deep, every inch a knight in bearing if not in name by the realm's backward custom. "I've heard tales of your prowess," Robb said. "At Horn Hill you unhorsed 3 men in one tilt." Brienne's cheeks colored. "I did my duty. A woman's strength is oft remarked, seldom respected. Garcia. Then let respect be your due," Robb answered. "The North honors valor wheresoever found." She inclined her head. "You speak kindly. I pray your host and mine draw swords as one." Her eyes flicked beyond him toward the lantern-lit pavilion of King Renly, gilded antler poles at each corner. "He believes we cannot be beaten. I would believe it too, if the gods are good." Robb followed her gaze. Inside, Renly discussed strategy with Lord Nethys Rowan and Margaery Tyrell. Laughter echoed, easy as hearth warmth. Yet Robb recalled Bolton's warning. Petals wilt beneath frost. He returned to his own pavilion where gray wind lay curled like a living shadow. The direwolf lifted its head at his entrance, amber eyes gleaming before relaxing again. Catelyn waited beside a cedar table strewn with updated maps. "Word has reached us," she said, "that Stannis sails from Dragonstone with Saladhor Saan's Sell-Sail fleet. Renly's scouts anticipate arrival within the week, perhaps sooner if the winds favor him." Robb poured hot wine, the steam wrapping his fingers. Then Renly must settle his claim before his brother's banners appear outside Storm's End. Once Stannis and Renly clash, the Lion may gain reprieve. Catelyn traced a river line south of King's Landing. "There is talk among Renly's council that we march west first, strike at the Lannisters while Stannis besieges his brother. Divide Lannister attention, break their grip on the capital. Yet if Renly falls to Stannis, the stag we follow may bear a different crown." "We will make our own crown," Robb answered. "The North stands apart. Let the Baratheon quarrel rage. Our purpose remains the wolf's purpose. Avenge, protect, endure. Yet even as he spoke, he knew alliance bound their fates. If Renly fell, they would face Stannis' Iron Creed alone, with only shattered reachmen to stand between. Night deepened. Torches flickered along trenches, and an owl hooted somewhere beyond the darkened hedge. Robb dismissed his captains, and stood alone once more beside the maps. He imagined routes along the Mander, along the Blackwater, marks on parchment yet to drip red in truth. He had been a boy when he left Winterfell, chasing vengeance with a sword too large for memory. Now war had fitted itself about him like armor, but he wondered if the steel would hold when ghosts pressed close. He rolled the maps, stowed quills, and knelt beside Grey Wind, burying fingers in thick fur. "Guard me," he whispered, though whether to the wolf or to the old gods he could not say. Grey Wind's steady rumble answered, reverberating through bone and heart alike. Robb's eyelids sagged. The day's march, the weight of alliance, the distant promise of battle, all pressed him toward sleep. Tomorrow, he would meet Renly's command in full council. Carve lines of advance, assign wings of cavalry to Umber and Tarly alike, though their rivalry already fermented like sour wine. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the alliance still gleamed bright and unbroken beneath moon and torch alike. He allowed himself, just briefly, to believe that dawn might rise anew upon a realm restored, a father avenged, sisters returned, Winterfell's halls echoing with jest and step once more. Beyond the canvas, the wind murmured through grass that knew only the weight of seasons. It did not care for banners, for crowns of forged iron or blooms of shining gold. It whispered ancient songs of frost and seed alike, and Robb Stark, half asleep beside his direwolf, dreamt of gray hills, of snowflakes dancing over the Godswood pond, of Bran's laughter echoing behind him as they raced to outrun the cold. Dawn broke amber. Trumpets sounded the council hour. Robb entered Renly's grand pavilion where sunlight dappled silk walls and a polished oak table sprawled beneath maps, weighted by jeweled chalices. Present were Renly, Margaery, Loras, Randyll Tarly, Mathis Rowan and two maesters, fussing with rolls of parchment. Catelyn and the Blackfish followed Robb. Roose Bolton slid in silent as breath. Renly greeted him with easy charm. "Brother in arms, our quarry grows impatient. Tywin coalesces at Harrenhal. Let us grant the lion his war lest he grow fat in waiting." He gestured to a map pinned by silver daggers. "I propose we split our strength. Your river lords and Northmen strike toward the Blackwater via the Roserat, while my reachmen take the Gold Road, hemming Jaime should he move north to relieve the capital. With swift marches we converge at King's Landing, one host at the Mud Gate, the other at the Dragon Gate, before Stannis can seize the city." Tarly cleared his throat. "Speed favors us only if discipline matches. Road supplies thin beyond Bitterbridge for tens of leagues. Forage is scarce where Lannister reavers burned. If we advance too hastily, we court starvation." Menesekanos. Roose Bolton's pale fingers hovered above a patch of green, and we should account for the Kingslayer's unpredictability. A swift thrust into the Westerlands could lure him from Harrenhal, fracturing his lines. Catelyn leaned forward. A feint, then. "Wolves along the Roserad, stags along the coast, meet at Griffin's Roost to threaten Storm's End's rear. Yet Stannis approaches from sea." "Stannis," Renly cut in, a trace of scorn threading the single word. "My brother will find Storm's End holds strong, and even his Red Priestess cannot conjure breach where my lordship commands loyal hearts." Yet Robb saw a flicker behind the Green King's bright eyes, a wariness quickly hidden. The debate rolled on. Supply carts, ferry rights, levy timing, until news bells chimed from a distant sept. Sweat beaded along the map edges, though autumn offered coolness outside. Robb listened, weighed, measured. His own lords wished immediate strike at Harrenhal to free the Riverlands. The Reach lords urged seizure of the capital. Somewhere between lay victory or ruin. In the afternoon lull, Robb walked with Margaery Tyrell along the camp's central lane, guards discreet but present. She spoke of high gardens, orchards, of children laughing among colonnades heavy with morning dew. Her eyes, green flecked with gold, searched his as though measuring not a man, but a future. "The realm hungers for peace, your grace," she said softly. "A wolf and a rose upon the same banner would sate many appetites." Her meaning was clear as daylit water. Robb thought of Jane Westerling, the girl he had not yet met, whose fate changed his own in another life untraveled. Here, in this moment, the realm's future courted his heart with diplomacy and fragrance. He answered only with courtesy. "Peace is the harvest we all desire, my lady. Yet harvest cannot come before seed and toil." A flicker of disappointment, or was it calculation, crossed her face before she smiled anew. "Then let our gardeners labor swift and sure." She curtsied and left him to the mutter of tents and the rustle of parchment. That night, Robb summoned his lords in secret council, within a ring of wagons shielded from prying ears. There, by guttering lantern light, arrows of argument flew dodge-wild. Greatjohn demanded immediate march. Bolton counseled caution still. In the end, Robb declared they would press east toward the Blackwater with half their number, while Renly's reachman slid west to sever Jaime's lines. They would test the lion's resolve, draw him into the open. The decision felt like stepping onto a frozen lake, trusting steel-shod boots not to break the ice. Gray wind howled once, long and low, as though sensing unseen cracks. The army stirred before dawn 2 days later. Campfires died beneath boot and hoof. Wagons creaked, banners shook dew in cascades. Robb rode at the head of his column, Theon Greyjoy at his right, Grey Wind pacing close. Renly's host curved westward beyond a ridge, bright and jubilant. For one brief instant, from the crest of a hill, Robb beheld the twin rivers of men parting the autumn ground. Wolf and stag diverging yet bound by invisible thread. Trumpets signaled farewell, echoing across the still air. He raised his sword in salute. Renly answered, antlered helm glinting like sunrise upon bronze. Then distance snatched them apart. The Wolf King turned his gaze east toward dusty roads, scorched hamlets, and the looming thunderhead of Lannister strength beyond. Around him his bannermen murmured in anticipation, their eagerness whetted by promise of shared victory, plunder, vengeance. Yet as the columns wound into the horizon, Robb felt a prickle along his spine, as though eyes watched from beyond sight. He glanced back once more. Renly's banners were bright specks now, slowly fading behind rolling land. And something inside him whispered that brightness could be fleeting as dawn, soon drowned in noon's harsh glare. But he had made his choice. He spurred his horse onward, into a future yet unwritten, where wolves marched beneath southern sun, and the realm held its breath for what the two young kings might rot together, or tear asunder. Ahead lay dust and iron, blood and fire, but also the faint, flickering possibility that this alliance, this fragile weaving of north and south, could reshape the world. The sun climbed, the road unspooled, and the drums of war beat steady in the young king's chest, calling him toward destiny step by measured step. Each hoofall a word in the long story yet to be told. Kande. The afternoon sun tilted low behind a curtain of ragged clouds as Robb Stark's column followed the winding curve of the Rose Road. Dust-brown hedgerows flanked the battered track, and beyond them fields of stubble stretched toward distant copses, where crows gathered like black knots in wind-worried cloth. The host advanced in a steady heartbeat of iron. Hiss of mail, clop of shod hooves, the creak of wagons laden with arrows and barley, pitch cauldrons, and dried salt cod. Somewhere up the column, a piper tested a northern air that fell flat in the Reach's damp breeze, but the men found comfort in the familiar notes all the same. Robb rode with Grey Wind pacing silent beside his destriers off-shoulder. The direwolf's coat, dull silver in northern frost, had taken on plum-dark streaks of road dust. Yet yellow-eyed vigilance never dulled. Every flinch in the brush, every wayward bird startled into flight drew the wolf's attention, and by extension, Robb's. 2 days' march lay behind them since they parted Renly's camp. Their scouts reported no sign of Lannister patrols, but Robb felt the weight of unseen watchers in each whispering wheat stem. Toward evening they crested a low ridge where a fallen oak straddled the road. The trunk, once ancient, had been felled in haste. Its branches formed a crude barricade, manned by half a dozen gaunt small folk armed with billhooks and hunting bows. Their surcoats bore no sigil, only grime. The eldest, a wiry man with a bent back, raised a trembling hand when he spied the direwolf. His voice cracked like dry twigs. "Beggin' pardon, my lords. We meant no harm, only to keep the red lions from our grain." Caitlin reined up beside her son, eyes softening at the sight. "Who burns your grain?" "Sir Emery Lorch rides these fields," the bent man replied. "They take what they can carry, torch what they can't. My wife Tamlin was carried off to Harrenhal. She's not been seen since." His throat bobbed around unshed grief. "We heard tell a northern king marched with justice and saddlebag. Justice and bread alike, we pray." "Nyan." Robb dismounted, pulled the gauntlet from his right hand, and clasped the farmer's weather-cracked palm. "You have my word. The wolf's justice will hunt those who wrong you. Clear the road and travel north with our baggage train. You'll eat at our fires till your fields are safe to sow." Tears welled in the farmer's eyes. He gestured frantically to the others, who scrambled to dismantle their barricade. Children appeared from behind the trunk, clutching bundles no larger than kittens. And one small boy stared wide-eyed at Grey Wind, until the wolf flicked an ear, and the child's grin dawned like sunrise through fog. The encounter dragged minutes from the march, but as dusk settled, Robb felt a measure of purpose wash through the ranks. A king who paused for peasants, a host that sheltered the realm rather than consumed it. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless, and the men carried it like a hidden talisman against the night. They made camp on the banks of a nameless stream that cut the road at a shallow ford. Tents sprang in neat rows, pickets posted, cookfires sparked, and the air filled with a hearty perfume of barley stew, thickened by generous spoonfuls of lard, gifted from rich granaries, spared the lion's torch. Robb took supper beneath a canvas awning lit by 2 rushlights. Around him gathered Galbart Glover, Daisy Mormont, Daisy's mother mage, busy elsewhere with a leaky wagon wheel, and Lord Rickard Karstark, whose brooding silhouette loomed over the flame as though resentment itself sat to table. Roose Bolton arrived last, pale as bone in gray velvet, hands folded, as though he carried an invisible dove he dared not crush. Glover reported the day's foraging tally: 20 sheep, 3 barrels of sour cider, a storehouse of turnips left untouched by Lannister hands, and suggested doubling guards on the wagons once they neared the burned villages south of Hayford. Daisy Mormont swapped scouting stories about hedge knights gone brigand. Karstark muttered doubts about the Reach Lord's stomach for real battle. Bolton said little, yet his silence pricked as pointedly as any sword. When the others took their leave, he lingered, eyes reflecting torch glare like 2 dull coins. "You take on burdens quickly, your grace," he remarked, tone almost gentle. Robb sensed the knife beneath the silk. "Feed every mouth along our path, and soon you'll find your wagons light and your soldiers heavy with charity." Robb wiped stew from his beard's first dark growth. "I'd rather lighten wagons than hearts. A wolf does not feast while the pack starves." Bolton's thin smile flickered. "Just remember, hunger stalks long after banners fall, and compassion is a purse that fills slowly but empties at knife speed." Robb inclined his head in dismissal. Bolton dipped in a bow of skeletal grace, then slipped away into shadow with the hush of a spider at nightfall. He could not sleep. In his tent, Robb sat cross-legged beside Grey Wind, sharpening a longsword whose name he had yet to choose. Naming felt presumptuous until deeds earned legend. The whetstone whispered over steel while thoughts churned. Bolton's warnings, Renly's easy laughter beneath antlered helm, the bent farmer's cracked voice, and Stannis' fleet rumored to land any hour upon the shores of Blackwater Bay. Each thought pressed upon his ribs like frost heavy on pine boughs. He slept at last against the direwolf's flank, dreams swirling with antlered shadows, and a golden lion pacing just beyond flickering torchlight. The host rose before dawn. Gray sky threatened drizzle. As they broke camp and filed onto the road, Robb dispatched riders westward to keep sight of Renly's march. Ravens carried missives north to River Run. Provisions needed, wounded count, rumor of Stannis' approach. Catelyn remained near her son, offering counsel, while drafting letters of her own to the Arryns, whose solitude in the Eyrie persisted despite a realm aflame. Mid-morning brought the first sign of Lannister steel. A plume of smoke twisted from beyond a low rise where an orchard once thrived. Scouts returned, a foraging party, 24 carrying off barrels of cider toward a fortified manor house another mile south. Robb spurred Grey Wind ahead with 100 mounted Northmen and the riders of House Mallister. They crested the hill at a gallop, banner rippling, a direwolf swallowing a trout beneath twin red towers, while in the valley the Lannisters scrambled for saddles. Robb smelled apple rot and char as they descended. He saw boys no older than Bran bearing pikes for their masters, guilt and terror alike in their eyes. A horn cried thinly. Arrows hissed from northern bowstrings and thudded into barrels, horses, a man's unarmored throat. The Lannister line broke before it formed. Half tried to flee through the orchard, the rest threw down spears and begged quarter. The melee lasted barely the length of a prayer. When silence settled, Robb ordered the captured boys disarmed and fed. Their sergeant, a wiry man named Jaren, was stripped of sword and rank, but spared the rope, sent back toward Harrenhal with a message burned into his memory. The king in the north rides south with justice and steel, and every village sacked will be repaid in Lannister blood. Ink on parchment could scarcely travel faster than rumor. By dusk, scouts brought word that Lannister outriders had fallen back toward Duskendale, leaving smoldering farmsteads half-burned in their haste. Robb worried it at the map with Galbart Glover, tracing possible ambush sites along the Dusk River. Night smothered the camp under a blanket of drizzle, and torches smoked fitfully in the damp. The next 5 days knit together in a tapestry of cold rain, endless mud, and the relentless rhythm of Northmen striding deeper into Southland. Orchard smoke lingered like ghosts. Yet morale, buoyed by small victories and the steady distribution of commandeered Lannister grain, held firm. Each evening as fires crackled, the men told tales of Winterfell snows so deep a man could walk onto the hall's roof, of bear hunts on Bear Island, of the heartbeat hiss of ice forming on rivers at season's turn. The reach levies drawn from Hayford and Brandywine listened, enraptured by stories of frozen giants and children of the forest. Distance closed between accents. A common road breeds uncommon kinship. On the 6th night, beneath a waning half-moon, Robb found his mother at prayer before a small driftwood hearth she'd set outside her tent. 7 polished stones ringed the embers, one for each aspect. She pressed 2 fingers to her brow and murmured for sense of safety. When she finished, Robb knelt opposite. "I lean on hope as one leans upon a spear haft," she whispered. "Yet the haft shows cracks." "We will mend every crack," he answered. Catelyn shook her head. "Even mended spears may shatter. I fear for Renly. Word rides on every breeze. Stannis has landed north of Storm's End. Flint fires bright on Cape Wrath. Siege engines aimed at their own walls, brother against brother." Robb felt the cold prick of foreboding along his spine. Renly commands more men, and the Reach stands beside him. The gods weigh more than numbers. Her gaze flicked to the stones, and rumor speaks of a red shadow in Stannis Hall, a woman in scarlet who whispers flame and prophecy. "I have ghosts enough to suit me," Robb said, half-smile failing to rise. He rose instead. "Sleep, mother. We march at dawn." But dawn brought no march. A messenger spurred into camp, cloak soaked black with night's rain, horse lathered and near collapse. He tumbled before Robb's tent, gasping wordless until Maester Vyman crouched with water. The soldier's lips trembled as he forced out the news. King Renly, in his own tent, slain. Silence slammed the morning like a shutter in storm. Catelyn clutched the messenger's wrist. "Slain? By whom?" "His guards say." A shadow with a woman's shape passed through canvas walls. The man swallowed, eyes darting. "Sir Loras gone mad with grief. Stormlanders break. Reach lords argue with Tarly. Some swear fealty to Stannis. Some flee west. Chaos, my lady. Chaos and blood. Robb stepped back as though struck. The tent seemed smaller, the air thinner. Each breath a task. Gray wind prowled outside, hackles high, sensing the pull. Robb's mind raced through possibilities. Assassination by Lannister Gold. Stanna's hand? The Red Priestess whispered by rumor? No answer mattered. The result stood grim. His great alliance severed before its first joint stride. Within hours, ravens rode skyward bearing urgent commands. Scouts redirect east to track Renly's fractured host. Foragers tighten to interior lanes. All banners recall to central encampment. Robb summoned his lords beneath a rain-soaked canopy. Bolton arrived in the same slate-colored cloak, expression unreadable, save for the faintest arch of brow. A prediction fulfilled. Karstark paced like a restless bear. We cannot wait on the reach to choose a side, else Tywin marches unhindered. Galbart Glover jabbed a finger at the sodden map, pinned to a crate. If Renly's men splinter, Stannis may seize storms and by week's end, then wheel north along Blackwater Bay. We'll find ourselves between lion and fiery stag. Mage Mormont slammed her fist. Let them come. The north wilt not tremble at a Southron Hearthgyre. Yet every voice carried the tremor of uncertainty. Robb sat silent until debate burned to embers. When at last he spoke, the hush felt brittle as pond ice. We ride not for the lion alone now. We ride for our own road. The reach may follow, or they may fold. We cannot steer a host whose king fell to a whisper. His gaze swept them, trench candle flicker, across bearded cheeks, and rain-spotted steel. We march east still, but we bend south along the Dusk River toward Brindlewood. There we harass Lannister supply lines to King's Landing. Tywin must either meet us or starve his own garrison. He turned to Bolton. You will take the flanking horse. Keep between us and Stannis' advance. Send scouts wide. Bolton's nod held the softness of a serpent crossing snow. I shall keep him close enough to taste our scent, yet far enough to miss our throat. Orders rippled. The camp exploded into motion. Tents struck, wagons rolled, fires quenched. No song sprang from lips this morning. Renly's death rode every saddle, as though a second rider, heavy and silent. But war allows no pause for mourning those you barely met. 2 days' forced march brought them to the Dusk River's mystery-shrouded banks. Here autumn woods crowded the watercourse, maple leaves igniting in scarlet fires above black trunks slick with rain. Fish traps lay abandoned. The small folk had fled days earlier. Robb's engineers felled pines for a temporary pontoon. Ropes, barrels, planks lashed into a trembling spine across the current. Gray wind paced the shoreline, uneasy with the scent of marsh and something older. An unease that seeped into men's shoulders. The first companies crossed beneath a bright half-moon, its light broken upon riffles. In the hush, Galbart Glover whispered that Harrenhal's shadows stretched this far. Tales of stone that wept with the screams of Harren's burned sons. Superstition or strategy, the men gripped sword hilts tighter until their boots found the eastern bank. It was near midnight when the Lannister outriders struck. 3 horns blared from the rear guard. Torches bloomed across western hills. Red-orange daisies, bobbing as riders, erupted from tree cover. Their hooves hammered the soft earth. Arrows glittered like wasp stings. Northern spears bristled along the pontoon's mouth. Archers loosed into the darkness. 2 flaming brands arced high, missed the bridge, and hissed out in the river. A third stuck in plank rope and began to chew Jada. Robb vaulted onto his horse, gray wind at flank. He thundered across the unfinished bridge toward the embattled rear. Rain of sparks spattered horse and rider as the torch gnawed through pitch-soaked cordage. Over screams and clash he bellowed to Daisy Mormont. Hold the center. Then drove into melee. Steel rang. Gray wind leapt, jaws closing on a horse's throat. Beast and rider toppled. Robb's blade cut a downward arc that clove pauldron leather, and warmth splattered across his gauntlet. A spearman jabbed. Robb parried, riposted, felt the shock of bone. He had no leisure for counting kills, only motion. Only the pulse that pounded through sword and sinew alike. Torches whirled, casting chaos in molten yellows and bloody blacks. Then the wolf song rose, the guttural roar of northern men charging under umber war cries. From the riverline surged the Great John and his berserkers, axes whirling. The night split on iron. Within moments, the attackers faltered. A horn wailed retreat. Hooves pounded away, vanishing like sparks into a sea of dark. When quiet settled, it lay oppressive. Men hauled the dead to the riverside, stacking Lannister corpses apart from their own. A grim sentinel, Maester Veman, moved among the wounded, his white sleeves soon crimson. Robb wiped blade on cloak hem. He found Bolton beside the bridge, directing repair as though the skirmish had been an inconvenience. His face remained marble. "They tested us," Bolton observed. "A small claw, to gauge the wolf's hide. Tomorrow may bring the lion's jaws." "Men now will be ready," Robb answered, yet fatigue tugged at his bones. Renly's promise of numbers now ashes, Stannis' silence a looming specter, and Tywin's riders proving nimble as smoke. Still, the pontoon held. By dawn the army's tail reached the eastern shore. Robb allowed half a day's rest to patch wounds and fletch new arrows. He walked among the tents, thanking common soldiers by name when he knew them, by deed when he did not. He paused at a row of makeshift stretchers where Sir Owen Nare gasped through a punctured lung. Robb knelt, pressed cool water to Owen's lips, promised land in Nori's name for any children left at home. Whether the promise might be kept, he did not know, yet he made it with a king's duty heavy upon tongue and heart. Catelyn watched from a distance, pride warred with worry. As dusk spread violet wings across the river valley, she joined him by the camp's lone remaining septon. Candlelight flickered on her weary cheeks. "You are no prince of songs, Robb," she murmured. "But you are my son, and you weave hope as father once wove honor." He clasped her hand. "And you weave strength as the gods weave night and dawn." The army pressed southeast along deer trails to confound pursuit. Their maps named village after hamlet long ago, but now hearth smoke rarely rose. Where life persisted, it did so, in root cellars and hidden dens. Every save offered from wolf-clad soldiers coaxed new refugees into the baggage train. Gray-bearded women with spindle and spoon, wide-eyed daughters clutching ragdolls, old men steadying plowshares reshaped to spears. Robb worried that Bolton's warning might prove truer with each mouth gained. Yet each night he ordered ration counts, and each night the quartermasters conjured just enough. Flour seized from lion-held mills, eels trapped in the dusk, acorn meal traded from woodland clans. On the 10th day past Renly's death, the host reached Brindlewood, a crumbling holdfast once sworn to House Rosby. Its curtain walls sagged, but still offered refuge. Robb established headquarters within the hall's moss-grown shell. From the parapet he could spy smoke columns to the west, 15 perhaps more, marking Lannister's supply caravans inching toward King's Landing. Harrenhal lay northwest. Riverland scouts whispered Jaime remained under Sir Stafford's banner there, skirmishing with Bracken rebels. Tywin himself, rumor said, withdrew to the capital to fortify walls and court Tyrell alliance, now left unmoored. Night conferences stretched long. Glover urged a strike at the caravans. Karstark clamored for Harrenhal. Bolton spoke of patience, wear down the lions by inches. Robb weighed each counsel. He pored over raven scrolls, some bearing secret marks from spies within the Red Keep reporting unrest. Joffrey's cruelty, the Highborn's hoarding, bread riots suppressed by gold cloaks. If King's Landing starved, Tywin might gamble a decisive engagement to clear supply lines. That engagement, Robb decided, must be on ground of his choosing. He ordered Umber, Mormont, and Brackenhorse to begin night raids. Strike wagons, torch fodder, spare small folk but scatter guards. Never linger. The next week became a blur of red-lit horizons. Wagons aflame, lion banners tattered in roadside ditches. Each dawn brought new captives marched into Brindlewood. A driver, a paymaster, a sellsword. From these Robb gleaned routes, schedules, whispers of Tywin's wrath. Then a change. Lannister patrols thickened. Scouts reported a host of 10,000 under Saradam Marbrand, moving east of Byford, burning tree lines to deny cover. Farther south, Stannis Van forces seized Weeping Town. His ships blockaded Blackwater Bay. 3 kings now pressed King's Landing like hammer and anvil and wedge of northern steel. Yet allies still outnumbered Lannister's strength, if only they might coordinate. Robb dispatched ravens to Stannis Baratheon offering truce while the lion yet roared. No reply returned. Instead, on a fog-laden morning, Bolton's riders intercepted a lone Tyrell knight, galloping north under a banner of parley. He was Sir Jon Fossaway, ready gapple sigil dark with road grime. In Robb's hall he knelt, helm tucked under arm, cheeks hollow from sleepless nights. "My lords," he began. "Highgarden's banners scatter since King Renly's murder. Mace Tyrell flirts with King Tywin's gold. Randall Tarley holds Hornhill for Stannis should he prevail. The Reach bleeds confusion. Lady Margaery remains in Bitterbridge under heavy guard. We fear she may become pawn to any who take her." His eyes flicked to Robb. "There are those of us, Lord Mathis Rowan, Lady Graceford, House Hightowers, younger sons, who would rather see wolves remain wolves than lions grow fat upon roses. We seek alliance anew," Karstark muttered. Glover leaned forward. Robb asked, "On what terms?" "March with us to break the blockade of Bitterbridge. Free Lady Margaery. Hearten the Reach lords, who yet linger in doubt. In return, we pledge grain and swords enough to keep your war swift." "Mamur." Bolton's voice slipped between candle shadows. "Grain and swords pledged before, yet their king died." Serion's jaw tightened. "We were betrayed by magic darker than any mortal oath." "Magic." The word rippled the hall, unsettling rational men. But Robb thought of the Shadow Tale. He thought of Stannis' Red Woman. He thought, too, of supplies dwindling and winter's early promise in the chill wind. He saw a forked road. Stay, starve, be ground between lions and fiery stags, or seize allies while chance remained. He dismissed the night to quarters while the council argued deep into night. At length, over the low crackle of dying brands, Robb spoke. "We march to Bitterbridge." Bolton's eyes cooled. "A second alliance may shatter as swift as the first." "Perhaps," Robb said. "Yet if we do nothing, we shatter surely. Wolves endure by movement. Plans formed like frost rime. A swift forced march southwest under cover of harvested coppice. Cross the Mander at Sutler's Ford. Strike Bitterbridge before Lannister scouts confirm their departure. Leave Glover and the Brackens to hold Brindlewood with a skeleton force. Torches and fakery to exaggerate numbers. Move light, move fast." Within a day the army broke camp, leaving trenches filled to mimic occupancy. They traveled northwest first, to confound watchers, then struck sharp south, after dusk. Rain fell in silver sheets. Moonlight danced upon puddles like thrown coins. The host slogged through lowland swamp, horses fetlock deep in black water, men dragging wagons across crude corduroy logs. Gray wind swam channels with effortless grace, ears pivoting for danger. Robb's cheeks stung with chill, yet the forward drive lent warmth. By the third dawn they neared Sutler's Ford, but the crossing was held. Fires dotted the far bank, word plumes swirling in damp air. Through spyglass Robb saw crimson cloaks, polished spears. House Sutler had bent knee to Lannister gold. More, a crimson lion standard fringed in gold popped above the rainy gloom. Tywin anticipated this route. Robb called halt beneath dripping willows. He convened his captains among ghost trees, the rain's susurration masking their voices. Sir Edmure's cousin Carol proposed a night crossing upstream. Dacy Mormont favored storming the ford before dawn. Bolton, silent until pressed, offered an alternative. A diversionary campfire assault on the ford, while a smaller strike force circled east to seize a shallower crossing, known only to smugglers. Time pressed like a dagger. Robb weighed risk against risk. "Bolton will command the Eastern Circuit," he decided. "Greyjohn leads the feint with horn and fury. I ride with Bolton." Karstark bristled at being left to hold baggage, but Robb calmed him with promise of first strike in the assault on Bitterbridge. Night fell, absolute. Great John's war horns blared before the ford, and fires sprang along the bank, illuminating umber axes chopping at palisade stakes. Arrows answered. Meanwhile, Robb and Bolton led 500 mounted through rain-slick reeds and marsh thicket, torches doused, mud up to girths. Gray wind ghosted ahead, form melding with shadow. They followed a game trail skirting a stunted ridge until water gleamed pale ahead. The smugglers wade. Depth barely reached horse bellies, current gentle. They crossed in silence, shields raised against possible moonlit betrayals. On the far bank, Lannister sentries huddled around a sputtering brazier, inattentive. 2 fell to arrows before their cries rose, the third to Grey Wind's silent leap. Within moments, Robb's force galloped along the bank toward the rear of the main ford camp. Bolton loosed a white-bladed dirk, signal to charge. Steel thunder answered. Torches snatched from surprised Lannister hands lit chaos. Umber roars erupted across the river as they saw allies flashing through enemy ranks. Robb's sword tasted Iron Sword Knight again and again. He ducked under a spear thrust, cut the hamstring. Wheel parried another. Bolton's men fought with eerie quiet, blades gliding like ice on bone. Firelight shimmered on their pale faces, and for a heartbeat, Robb saw not soldiers but ghouls waltzing through gore. Cries rose, "They're behind us!" Panic spread through crimson ranks. Horses screamed. The palisade gate gave under umber axes. Within the hour the ford was theirs. Dawn's first gray washed over bodies, strewn in tangled weeds. River water pinking downstream. Robb walked the field, chest heaving. The Great John clasped his shoulders, laughter mingling with steam of exhausted breath. A fine dance, young wolf. Even a lion would envy such step. But Bolton's gaze fixed on the stylus of scattered corpses, the curl at his lips inscrutable. He knelt by one dead Westerman, rolled back a cuff to reveal the twin towers of House Frey. A spy, perhaps, or a sellsword, under mistaken colors. Bolton met Robb's eyes with a hint of amusement. Allegiances twist stranger than rivers. They burned the palisade, took what fresh mounts they could, and by noon the host crossed in full. Prisoners were offered bread and safe escort north should they swear to lay down arms. Many accepted, shattered by night's terror. Great John grumbled at leniency, but Robb held firm. Every man spared here might be one less to face later. 3 more days' hard riding brought Bitterbridge into view. A small town straddling the Manor where fields of trampled wheat ringed the walls. Smokes of cook fires rose within, and patched banners fluttered uncertainly. Some Tyrell, some Tarly, one rearing gold lion above a makeshift keep of cart timber in the market square. Fossaway's scouts met them in a copse overlooking the plain. Tarly holds the center with 3,000. The lead scout reported. A Lannister envoy inside, promising gold and marriage for Margaery. Lord Rowan and Lady Graceford are besieged in the sept with what remains of Renly's guard. Robb surveyed the ground. Gentle slopes, river curling behind town, 2 wooden footbridges beyond arrow range. One upstream, one down. Wheat stubble offered poor cover. A siege could drag days. Stannis loomed behind them. He turned to Karstark. Take 200 horse across the upstream bridge after dark. Mormont will circle downstream. At midnight the wolf's twin fangs strike while I knock on the gate. Stars hid behind cloud when troops took positions. Inside Bitterbridge, a lone horn blew half-hearted watch calls. Townsfolk cowered in their shuttered huts. Midnight crept. Then the silence shattered. A wolf howl from Karstark men inside the walls, returned by bear roars from Mormont's, forced downstream. Flames burst along ramparts where Targ's mothered hay bales ignited. Robb's main host charged the gate. Rams thundering. Arrows whistled. Gray wind darted ahead, silhouette outlined in fiery orange. Within, chaos reigned. Tarly's disciplined center fought fiercely, but found rear ranks vanishing as Karstark and Mormont tore through side streets. Rowan loyalists broke from the sept singing. The king still lives, though which king none could say. Robb rode through shattered gate as its hinges screamed, sword high, calling for surrender lest townsfolk suffer. Many dropped weapons. A knot of Tarly's household guard formed shield wall near the square, protecting Marguerite Tyrell cloaked in shadow and fear. Robb dismounted, helm under arm, and strode toward them alone, gray wind at heel. "Enough," he called above the din. "Lay down steel. Lady Marguerite walks free under my protection." A reaching spear wavered. The captain, eyes bloodshot with sleep lost since Renly's death, answered, "We swore to Lord Randall to keep her from Stannis." "You face no king's shadow here, only northern honor," Robb replied. "And I vow safe escort to Highgarden or River Run at her choosing." Marguerite's voice, calm despite the smoke. "Captain, I will go with King Robb. The Reach cannot bloom watered by blood alone." The guard hesitated, then reversed spear. Others followed. Robb inclined head, signaled Raychon to accept their surrender. Moments later, Tarly's colors dipped from the makeshift keep, replaced by a white banner. Dawn found Bitterbridge secure, fires extinguished. Exhausted women emerged to fetch water. Children chased each other among discarded shields, life reasserting fragile claim. In the great hall of the manse, Robb met with Lady Marguerite, Lord Rowan, Sir John Fossaway, and other Reach loyalists. Grain stores were tallied, new terms struck. Grain and swords pledged anew, not to a dead king, but to the living cause of freeing Westeros from tyranny north and south. Marguerite herself requested passage to Highgarden to steady her house against Tywin's advances. Robb agreed, assigning Umber escorts. As they spoke, Bolton arrived bearing a parchment sealed with wax, stamped by a fiery heart encircling a stag. Stannis' reply at last. Yet not to truce. Robb broke seal, skimmed. Stannis demanded fealty, naming himself rightful king by law and God, charging Robb with rebellion equal to Joffrey's. "Lay down arms or face the sword of justice," it read. "For the night is dark and full of terrors." No mention of alliance. Only ultimatum. Robb crumpled the scroll. "Then we stand alone," he murmured. Catelyn, who read the words over his shoulder, set her jaw. Not alone. The North, the Riverlands, and now what remains of the Reach. And fathers still whisper to sons of Stark honor. "Death to home." Karstark burst in, breathless. Riders approach from the north, Lannister colors, a sighting near Brindlewood. Galbart Glover's Raven arrived minutes later. Tywin Lannister marched with 20,000, leaving King's Landing garrisoned by lesser men. Brindlewood's skeleton force shadowed them southward. Jaime, meanwhile, sallied from Harrenhal eastward. Robb felt the world tilt like a game board. Lions above, fiery stag below, and he the wolf in the wheat field. He closed hands around the cool stone of Bitterbridge's dour windowsill, gazed toward gold-lit dawn. "Then we choose our ground," he said. "We march north to meet Lord Tywin before he reaches Duskendale. If we break him, the city starves, and stag or lion alike must treat with us. And we'll carry Bitterbridge's grain with us to feed the march." Bolton bowed, almost pleased. "A bold snare. Few hunters bait the lion's cave." Robb turned to Marguerite. "Your roads will be dangerous, but the North remembers every oath repaid." She smiled, weary yet resolute. "And the Reach will remember the wolf who spared its flower." Gray wind howled, as though heralding the promise. Outside, soldiers gathered, some in wolf cloaks, some in rose, apple, and oak, forging lines where only ashes stood days before. They would march again, dawnlight knifing across helms, maps inked with fresh resolve. The wind brought scents of river mud and smoldered thatch. Yet beneath it, Robb caught the faint, sweeter note of new-baked bread. The town's ovens rekindled. For a moment he saw Winterfell's kitchens, snow drifting past the open flue, Arya squabbling with Sansa over lemon cakes. The memory steadied him. He would fight for that memory, for every child's laughter not yet swallowed by war's maw. Trumpets sounded assembly. Squires tugged saddles cinched tight. Banners unrolled from dew-damp poles. Robb Stark fastened his cloak, clasped a wolf's head crusted with river mud and road dust, and strode to his horse. Men raised their voices. The king in the north. Then, after a beat, others. The king of wolves and roses. And though titles mattered less than deeds, Robb felt hope rise like dawn beyond the town walls. They rode out of Bitterbridge in ordered ranks, the baggage trains swollen with grain, and with the rescued. Ahead, the Roserwad curved north in a ribbon of uncertain future. Somewhere beyond hills, Tywin Lannister's gold-red tide advanced. Somewhere beyond sea, Stannis' fleet threatened fire and shadow. Yet the wolf host marched, hearts beating the rhythm of long night, broken by oath, by honor, by the relentless necessity of surviving until spring. And the story, unfinished, unspooling with each hoofbeat, carried them forward into that gray, tremulous dawn, where fate waited like a coin spun high, glittering before the fall.